Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Welcome to the Talking Exports webinar series. My name is Joellen Larrier. I am the Senior Advisor for PR and Marketing at the Caribbean Export Development Agency. I will be moderating today, and we have got the absolute pleasure of having Mr. Ron Johnson from Blueprint Creative in Barbados, who will be presenting on the topic of branding. I think we've got quite a number of people that have registered for this webinar from across the region, which is absolutely fantastic. And we hope that you have a very, very good session as a whole. Before we get started, I'd just like to go over a few housekeeping points, which is that we will have some Q&A, specific times to do some Q&A throughout the presentation, and also we're dedicating a significant amount of time towards the end for Q&A and to have some discussions as such. You can use the panel to raise your hands and type your questions in the question field there. So this, as I say, this webinar is focused on branding. It is our third webinar in a series that we have been hosting, obviously since we are in this current situation of lockdown as such, and we really wanted to, bring some topics and some insights from some experts from across the region. Last week we had cash flow management, so if you missed that and you're interested, please do visit our website, carib-export.com, where you'll be able to find the recordings of previous webinars that have taken place. And we also do have some more webinars that will be coming on over the next coming weeks. So please do visit the website and register for those upcoming webinars. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Mr. Ron Johnson. He is the co-founder and managing director for Blueprint Creative, who are the world's first branding, communications and agency. So as I mentioned, we're talking about branding and HR branding in particular, and branding your organizations from the inside and out. Now, Blueprint Creative has been in operations for over 10 years. Ron has grown this company from a 3-person design team to one of the Caribbean's leading agencies, with a team of over 20 brand strategists, designers, problem solvers, idea generators, project managers, and copywriters. And under his leadership, in fact, the agency has won several Addy Awards for its design work and 3 Barbados Best Employer Awards for its highly engaging company culture and HR practices. Now, when I believe the branding HR is at the heart of Mr. Ron Johnson, and he has it's a growing trend that's tearing down the different silos between branding and HR, and I am going to hand over to Ron, who's going to talk to you a little bit more about this and how how important this field is, especially in a time of crisis. Isn't that right, Ron? I'll hand over to Ron.
Good morning, everyone, or perhaps afternoon, depending on where you're signing in from. Joellen, I just want to say thank you very much on behalf of the Blueprint Creative team for inviting me to participate in this really awesome series of webinars. I'm going to be going pretty fast today. We have a lot of ground to cover. My session is called "It Takes a Village to Raise a Brand, Especially During a Crisis." And we know right now that with the COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of people are really feeling the pinch. Travel bans, lockdowns, and just about every industry you can think about has been disrupted, and not in a very, very good way. So my session today will be taking you through how to build a strong brand using your full team. And we're going to go into this very, very quickly, but I just want to have a few ground rules to make it easier for this webinar to be very effective. And I'm going to show a video right now. It's pretty short, but I think you'll appreciate the humor in it and then we'll get straight into the session.
Trip Crosby
has joined the meeting. Beth has joined the meeting.
Hello?
Tyler?
No, this is Beth from ICS.
Oh, hey, Beth. How are you doing?
Oh, good. Yeah. Just making it, you know.
Tyler?
Has joined the meeting.
All right, well, this is Trip. Who's here? Tyler's here.
Beth's here.
Okay, the purpose of today's meeting is to discuss the,
Yeah, I'll be able to do it in like 30 minutes. John?
Has joined the meeting.
John, I was just trying to go over the purpose of today's meeting, which is to discuss the deliver. Tyler?
Has joined the meeting.
Sorry, guys, I got cut off.
Is Paul here? Send him an invite.
Put in your access code.
No, that's your PIN number.
It should be a 9-digit number.
Try pressing the pound key.
Paul,
Has joined the meeting.
any questions before we move on?
Yes, this is Beth. What's our best plan of attack for the second quarter?
Question
We
actually.
should do.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, well, I think
Well,
we should.
It actually depends on how you look at it, because the
really come.
Go ahead.
I think what
Given
we-
sales
well,
for
we
other
really-
Let me just say that. It was a great graph, John. Tyler?
Well, my main concern with projections from here was that they're just insufficient. I mean, they're not even taking into account.
Did we lose Tyler again?
Hello?
John, are you guys taking distributions? John? Oh, my bad. I was on mute. Let me start over. So I prepared a presentation. I'm sharing it with all of you. You should be able to see it on your screen right now.
Got it.
I don't see a link anywhere.
It says I need to download a plugin.
We are all using Macs, I'm assuming.
How can you?
Financials are looking great. Paul, do you have any comments on staffing?
I was thinking about that because we get a few more contractors. types in.
Rex, get down.
No, I
To me, staffing is a huge impact. Is that me? I just want to go over a couple of details as we move into our next section. We got 3 new departments coming on.
Break it up a little bit, guys.
Q3.
I'm
So
to the
I
dead
need
spot.
everyone to give me detailed evaluations each
Sorry,
month
guys.
so that we know. That's it, guys. Beth, you'll send out a recap email that's going to basically take the place of this whole meeting, correct?
Yep, always do.
Yeah, thanks for doing that, Beth. Dave, been here the whole time? Yeah. Huh. Well, thanks everyone once again. Oh, one more.
So I'm hoping that you guys saw the video and kind of appreciated the complexities sometimes of doing a webinar. So to make sure that what happened in that video doesn't happen with us here, we have a couple of ground rules. So Joellen, who is the host, everyone's mics are off to make sure that we don't get any feedback. The second rule is you gotta show the presenter, me, some love, please. When you're doing a live session, you can look on people's face and get their reaction. But I need you guys to show me some love, make sure that you are enjoying the session in the chat. We want this to be a dialogue and not a monologue. So if you do have any questions, you're gonna put it in the chat. Joellen is going to look at the questions. She's gonna moderate. She's gonna let you know, when there's an opportunity to ask your question. Then she's gonna turn your mic on. You're gonna ask the question, turn the mic back off, and then we're going to answer the questions and keep on going. So we do have a $50 Amazon gift card up for grabs. And this $50 Amazon gift card will be given to the most hyped person in this session. And the person who perhaps asks the most interesting questions, and Joe Ellen is going to be the person who's going to decide who gets this $50 Amazon gift card. So just getting to know each other very, very quickly. By the way, you can put in the chat which country you're from. My name is Ron Johnson. I am the co-founder of Blueprint Creative. I'm also the co-founder or the co-inventor of what we call the branding framework, which is a framework that integrates both marketing and HR. On a personal note, I love lemon sorbet. So if you're ever going to have a business lunch, expect me to order lemon sorbet. Blueprint Creative is one of the Caribbean's leading branding agencies. We've won several awards for our design prowess. We've also won 3 Barbados Best Employers Awards for our company culture and our HR practices. Yes, we are the world's first branding, and we spell it BHRANDING, and that's not a typo, but I'll explain to you exactly what that means in a few minutes. So we have a team of 20+ brand strategists, designers, problem solvers, project managers, all working together to help our clients build stronger brands and stronger businesses. So the goal for today's session is really explain why it takes a village to raise a brand. And we want to provide you with a step-by-step process to actually develop your village. Pretty simple objectives, guys. So I want to tell you a quick story. I usually start off most of my sessions with this, but it's a business fable, and it talks about these 2 guys who are hiking through the forest. And all of a sudden, they encountered this huge bear just about ready to devour them completely. The first hiker, he immediately bent down, he tightened his shoelaces very quickly, and it was obvious he was preparing to make a run for it. Now, the second guy looked at him and said, "Hey, what the hell are you doing? You can't possibly outrun a bear." The first guy, he took off on a sprint, and he looked over his shoulder and he said, "I don't have to outrun the bear, I just have to outrun you." Now, the lesson in this business fable is quite obvious. Sometimes you don't have to tackle the bear, right? But if you can outrun your competition, it really is natural selection right now. Companies that are slower or weaker, they're going to be ones who are going to fall victim to this pandemic a lot faster than organizations who take the time to tighten their shoelaces and take off at a brisk sprint. So my question for you today is, which hiker are you? Now here's a crash course on branding. A lot of people use different definitions for the word brand, but for our purposes, a brand is any action, program, or behavior that has an impact on what others think and feel about the organization's products and services. So think and feel, guys, is both an emotional component and a cerebral component. People tend to buy both based on emotions and then justify it with logic. So you might see a great pair of shoes that you like, and you really are buying it because you love how it looks or how it makes you feel, but then you'll justify it by saying, "Oh, it was affordable." So if branding is anything, if your brand is what people think and feel about your organization, its products and services, branding is anything at all that has an impact on the way people think and feel. So this might include public relations, buzz marketing, social media, content marketing, but it also includes intangibles, things like customer experience, how fast you take to respond to customer complaints, the quality of your actual products. So don't get suckered into thinking that branding is simply something you pay for or something that you can see visually. Literally everything that has an impact on how people see you, that can be classified as branding. So we're living in a world right now where the digital spotlight shows up so many inconsistencies in our brand. All you have to do is really to take a look at some of the missteps that companies have made and how it affected them in the long run in terms of their brand on social media. So I want to play a very quick video for you. I'm going to set this up. Basically, what happened was that there's a band called the Dave Carroll Music Band, and they were traveling on United Airlines. And apparently, according to the band, United broke their guitar. So the band tried to recover money from that very expensive guitar, and United Airlines said no. So what happened next? Well, basically the band did what came natural to them. I'm going to play you a clip, and this is a clip that the band posted online.
Flew United Airlines on my way to Nebraska. The plane departed Halifax, connecting in Chicago's O'Hare. While on the ground, a passenger said from the seat behind me, "My God, they're throwing guitars out there." The band and I exchanged a look that described his terror at the action on the tarmac, and knowing whose projectiles these would be. So before I left Chicago, I alerted 3 employees who showed complete indifference towards me. You broke my Taylor guitar. United. Some big hill you are. You broke, you should fix it. Your life just ended. I should have flown with someone else. You're gone by car. 'Cause United breaks guitars.
So this video racked up over 19 million views on YouTube. And it also caused United a great deal of embarrassment, to the point that some people believe this video actually made United stocks go down. And I played the video specifically because I want everyone to understand that when it comes to branding, your customer experience, everything you do can end up on YouTube. All you have to do is look at Google search, Comcast, nightmare customer call, or Uber company culture, and you're going to find all sorts of horror stories. So there's very little that a conventional advertising campaign can do in the face of something like this, which is why it's very, very important to take a holistic approach to your brand. So I mentioned earlier that Blueprint Creative has developed something called the branding framework. Really, it's branding, conventional branding, B-R-A-N-D-I-N-G, plus HR equals branding. And we spell that B-H-R-A-N-D-I-N-G. It's basically integrating HR into your branding process. And it means that as long as we understand that branding starts on the inside of the organization, it means that HR should be involved in any conversation dealing with branding. One of the core principles of branding is really employee brand engagement. And since we've introduced the concept of branding framework, we've actually been invited to speak on it in Barbados, Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, Cayman Islands twice, North America, Mexico, as far away as Malaysia. In the future, guys, when it comes to building brands, I'm telling you that HR and marketing are going to be working so closely together in the future. This is already happening. If you look at companies like Pizza UK, they have one person responsible for marketing and HR. If you look at Airbnb, for instance, you're going to see that they've evolved their HR department into what they call an employee experience department. And that employee experience department actually has in marketing, comms, real estate, corporate social responsibility, and they're killing it, you know. And what we need to do is to understand that branding, a holistic approach to branding, cannot include only social media, email marketing, advertising. It can't. We have to look at the entire brand chain. So what I want you guys to do right now is that I want you to imagine that you own a coffee shop, right? And I want you to imagine that you want the coffee at this coffee shop to be the best that anyone has ever tasted. You know, you want them to come in the coffee shop, you want the service to be great, they're gonna sit down in comfort of air conditioning, they're gonna have Wi-Fi that's blazing fast. It's gonna be freaking awesome, guys, right? But now I want you to imagine that you as a business owner, instead of buying premium beans, you have inferior coffee. I want you to imagine that your waiters and waitresses deliver the meals grumbling as opposed to smiling. I want you to imagine that the air condition is on the fritz and it's hot. I want you to imagine that the internet connection is just really, really, really slow. It drops out all the time. Now, I also want you to imagine that prior to opening your shop, you hired an awesome creative agency, and they did a really great job of branding. They did a really great job of social media. They did a really great job of internal branding with all of the, inside interior design. And I want you to think about it. Even if you have the very best visual brand, but you have everything else going wrong, do you really think that you still have a strong brand? Think about it. So this is why it takes a village to raise a brand. If you're using the coffee shop example, you can't just focus on the actual product that you have. If you have bad coffee in that coffee shop, if your AC is on the fritz, etc., you're going to have a really bad brand. So the best thing to do if you want to actually build a very strong brand is to work with every single person in your organization to make sure that they take their jobs very, very seriously and that everything is going to be running very, very smoothly. So, and this isn't only your employees, it has to be your vendors as well. So if you're opening a coffee shop, you have to choose a reliable person to do your AC. You have to choose a reliable person to set up your internet. So it's not just about the product, because even if you have a good product but everything else is off key, you have a really weak brand. So I'm gonna pause there for a second to find out if anybody has any questions. And Joellen is going to moderate. I don't have any questions yet, but right now, if you do have, feel free to type it into the question bar. And I'm going to proceed. I'm very, very conscious of your time, guys, and our time is very, very valuable, and I appreciate you being here this morning with us. So I'm going to go on, and Joellen, if you do have a need to stop me, please do so.
Yeah, so we did have a question that came in from Gideon Augustine, as it happens, from St. Lucia. Now, Gideon was asking how to go about creating a consistent brand message across all of the social media platforms and also in-person platforms. He runs a IT and project management consultancy in St. Lucia and is currently looking to export his services internationally and regionally.
Okay, that's a great question, and it actually segues right into what I have on the screen, which is start with the end in mind. If you really want to build a very consistent brand, I'm going to tackle it from the perspective of a visual brand, but I'm also going to tackle it from the perspective of things like company culture, employee experience. So the best way to have a consistent brand is to start with the end in mind. If you really don't care much about your brand, you can do anything you want. It really doesn't matter. But if you want to have a certain level of consistency, you have to insist on standards. So for instance, I'm going to tackle, before I tackle the visual branding end of things, I'm actually going to tackle the company culture. So if you really want to have a consistent team member, a consistent brand moving forward from the standpoint of company culture, you need to have what we at Blueprint call brand anchors. You need to know exactly what your vision is for the future. You need to understand what your core values are, and you need to manage by those core values. So for instance, at Blueprint Creative, our purpose is to inspire growth. So everything we do has to follow that purpose. So today's session, for instance, falls right in line for our brand, because as a result of this webinar, we're hoping that we inspire growth for everyone here, and then other people can also take that cue and improve and grow as well. So if you have your core values documented and articulated and you insist on it. So for instance, one of Blueprint's Creative's core values is have fun with a smidgen of craziness. And that's one thing that we hold really, really dear to our hearts. So we actively plan for it. We actually celebrate all of our team members' birthdays with mini birthday parties, even through remote working. We've continued to do that activities through a different platform that we use. But you have to know what you want from the very beginning, and you have to manage for it. If your team members are acting out of sync with your core values, you're going to have to make some very, very tough decisions. But starting with talking to them and say, this behavior is acceptable, this behavior is not. In the coffee shop example, if it is that customers come and say, hey, you know, you've got 10 coffee shops and the coffee is different at all of them, what's going on? You have to take that seriously, and you have to put things in place to make sure that consistency is there. In terms of a visual brand, one of the easiest things to do in terms of the question that was asked is to have parameters to say, this is what my brand's going to look like, this is the standard, and have like a style book. You know, so that no matter who is going out there representing your organization, whether it's your agency, your marketing department, there's some basic guidelines in terms of what fonts are we going to use, what type of imagery we're going to use. So for instance, if there's anyone here from Barbados, like whether they're a fast food preferred choice or not, you can spot a Chipette box a mile away, that bright yellow and purple. You know, once you see it, even if you took the logo off of it, you can know you're gonna know it's from Chipette. But that's because they insist on every piece of material that goes out looking the same. So I hope that answered your question. But my advice is to look at consistency not only from the visual brand, but from the service delivery aspect. Joe, do you think that answered the question?
Yes, I believe so. So I have to unmute myself there. Yes, I think that's good. We do have a few more questions, but in the interest of time, I will allow you to obviously continue with the presentation, and then we'll build a few more questions.
So full steam ahead. You need to let your team know during a crisis that this is not business as usual. It cannot be. This is one of the greatest disruptors that our generation has seen. And you know, if you take a look at productivity numbers across the Caribbean, you'll realize that a lot of our territories, our nations, really are not as productive as we should be. You know, if you look at things like the Doing Business Index, you have to let your team know that you're all in this together, and that if anyone isn't pulling their weight, it jeopardizes the entire organization. Let them know that in no uncertain terms. Because, you know, biologists are quick to tell you that, you know, it's not the biggest, the strongest, or the most intelligent that will survive. It really is the species or the ones that will adapt most quickly to changes in their environments. So you have to adapt very, very quickly. Business is littered with organizations that even in very strong economies still went out of business. If you take Blockbuster, for instance, they didn't adapt to changes in technology, and Netflix obliterated them. If you take a look at Kodak, you know, Kodak held on to its film business for way too long, and you know, was disrupted by digital technology. But one of the things that some people don't know is that Kodak actually pioneered digital technology, but they refused to bring it to market because it would disrupt their film and chemical business. So if you really want to survive, you know, you need to put your entire team on standby. Let them know it's not at all, it's not business as usual. So if you want to do some further reading on how to start with the end in mind, I recommend this book, Vivid Vision by Cameron Herold. It's a very short read, but it's a very powerful read, and it will help you set up what he calls a vivid vision for the organization. Chances are your vivid vision during a crisis will be slightly different from a vision pre-crisis or even post-crisis. So it may mean that some people may need to hit the reset button on their plans, but the basic thing is that you have to adapt very, very quickly to the scenario that's in front of you. Step two, you really, really need to build and engage an agile company culture. Agile, things need to move a lot quicker for your organization than it used to use in the past. And again, I'm going to keep hammering these points home. Brands are built from the inside of the organization, not the outside. So you need to have your team members on board. Again, go back to the coffee shop example. You have to have your team members, your leadership, and even your vendors on point, especially during a crisis when people have less disposable income. They're going to have to make difficult choices about everything from hiring to laying people off. But you've got to, the only way for you to get there is if you have the entire team on board, as opposed to just you as a business owner or you as the entrepreneur. Again, I'm hammering these points home because I really want to make a point. Simon Sinek, the author of Start With Why, he said, customers will never love a company until the employees love it first. Now think about that. If during this crisis, you need your customers to love your organization, I mean, really love it, that's not going to happen unless your employees love it first. I want you to think about that. Take a look at what Richard Branson said. Clients do not come first, employees come first. If you take care of your employees, they will take care of your clients. So I'm hoping I'm building a picture for you guys to understand that branding is not just what you put out there, but it's also what you put into your business. Here's another quote from Ginger Hardage. Brands are built from the inside out. The way a company behaves on the inside is going to find its way to the outside. You are going to be making a grave mistake if you go out on social media, on radio, on newspapers, whatever it is, and you're focusing on externals, but you don't focus on the internals. A great book for you to read if you want to learn more about company culture is from one of my favorite CEOs, Tony Hsieh. He built a company called Zappos that was eventually bought by Amazon for a couple of billion, and that's billion for B. This is a fantastic read, guys. You know, if you don't have a good company culture right now, you know, don't panic. There's an old Chinese business saying. It says the best time to plant a tree was 10 years ago. The second best time to plant a tree is today. So if you're going to start from day one and you say you want to completely reinvent your business from a standpoint of culture, this is a good place to start. Delivering Happiness by Tony Hsieh. Step 3, understand the changing needs of your ideal client. People's needs are going to change. They are, and they already have. In relatively strong economies, changes happen in a period of years or months. What's happening with COVID-19 is that people's needs are changing within weeks or days or even hours. So you have to keep very close to your customers, keep very close to your non-customers, and listen to hear what it is that they want during this crisis and how can we actually fulfill those needs. Joellen, I'm going to push forward. You can take a note of the questions. I think we'll kind of bundle them together in a very short space of time in a few minutes. So
yeah, no problem.
So step 4, you're going to have to make a decision very, very quickly about how exactly you're going to adapt. We already covered the fact that this is natural selection. It's not necessarily the biggest or the strongest that will survive or the most intelligent. It's the ones who are most adaptive to changing environment. So if you do have a good brand position, one of the things you should look at is reinforcing that position. Reinforce the fact that you're the market leader. Reinforce the fact that you're the most innovative. Reinforce the fact that you're most agile. Reinforce the fact that you give the best customer experience ever. But if it is that that's not what your brand positioning is, you have other options. You can reposition your brand. Think Old Spice, for instance. Old Spice was really being viewed at one point in time as being out of touch with the younger demographic until they came out with this really great ad. I'm not sure if you guys remember it. Look at your man, they look at me. Or look at your man, they look at me. And the advertisement is so ridiculous, but it was so funny and it got people's attention. And all of a sudden, Old Spice became cool again, and their revenues actually went up. In terms of retooling, there are some companies right now, I think Zara, the fashion brand, I think they have retooled, and they're retooling their equipment to make, I do believe, masks. If you take a look at some other companies, they have retooled. So I think it's a global fashion brand that normally makes perfumes. They've retooled to make hand sanitizer. There are companies here in Barbados who never made masks before. They made outfits for people, and they're doing masks right now. If you can retool your organization and make products and services that people really, really want, do it. Go ahead. But if you do it, you're going to have to go really, really quickly, really, really quickly. Right now, things are changing in a matter of weeks or days or hours. Now, if you're going to reinvent your brand, you really have to start with HR and not marketing. I'll explain why. If any of you guys are in the financial sector, you probably heard of Wells Fargo and the trouble they ended up with in 2016. So basically what happened was that Wells Fargo employees, they actually created millions of fake email addresses, millions. And they used those email addresses to set up fake financial accounts for credit cards and savings accounts for their customers without their knowledge. It was quite unethical, and it was actually illegal because they were charging customers millions of dollars in fees, and customers had no idea where it was coming from. And before they could figure out, the employees actually then deleted the email accounts and deleted the facility, the financial facilities, and it was just a big mystery until they got caught. So Wells Fargo decided that it needed to reposition its brand. And they went to a very large advertising agency and they got them to produce this ad. And I want you to take a look at it carefully. I want you to listen especially to the words, the narration behind the video.
We know the value of trust. We were built on it. Back when the country went west for gold, we were the ones who carried it back east. By steam, by horse, by iron horse. Over the years, we built on that. Because earning back your trust is our greatest priority. It's a new day at Wells Fargo, but it's a lot like our first day. Wells Fargo, established 1852, re-established 2018.
So I personally love this ad. Catch the beat, ba-da-ba-dum-ba, ba-da-da-da-da. It has this guy in the background. He sounds very, very sincere and very sorry for everything that's happened. You know, it has images of their stagecoaches back in the day. You know, it had kids in it. You know, they hit all the marks, Really, really good advertising campaign. The problem was that after this campaign came out, this came out. More scandals and more scandals and more scandals. Now, think about it. They probably spent millions of dollars on this ad to change their brand externally, but nothing had happened internally. Nothing had changed. And I really want you to focus on this principle that if you try to rebrand or reposition or reinvent using conventional marketing techniques and nothing happens on the inside, it's going to backfire on you. Because this ad I just showed, instead of being a slam dunk, people just, you know, kind of side-eyed like, okay, yeah, whatever. That's not really true. And I would hope that none of your organizations are in such deep trouble where you're going to be called before Congress or the government to account for your actions. But chances are there are some things in your organization that you would prefer to change and that you would prefer to kind of, I don't want to say start over, but kind of fix. But if you're going to do that, you got to fix it from the inside as opposed to the outside. So I'm hoping that somebody has some interesting questions about this. I'm hoping that Joellen is taking note right now.
Yes, actually. There are a couple of questions. Unfortunately, a few people weren't able to hear the sound of that video. But I gather that we get the gist of the point that you're trying to put across there. We had a question actually from, well, there's two questions I think that are quite well related. So we have a question from Nikisha Montiso. She would like to know, how can you positively impact your brand whilst working with unsupporting team members? And following on from that, actually, given Augustine has also asked, what's your perspective on actually outsourcing your HR department? Because how will that impact your ability to brand? If, say, for example, you're a small business and you're actually going to outsource your HR function as opposed to having it in-house. So I think those two questions are quite related, and I believe that would be good to understand your perspective on those.
Okay, so let me do the first question first in terms of building a strong brand with team members who are uncooperative, right? Was that the question?
Yeah, unsupportive team members was the word.
Okay, so I think that I'm going to deal with that question as if it's real time, as if it is happening right now. One of the first things you need to do is to give your team members a reality check, a serious reality check. Even in good, strong economic conditions, companies go out of business. We mentioned Blockbuster, we mentioned Kodak, there are other companies as well. But right now is the time you need to be honest and transparent with your staff. You need to tell them where the company is. Some companies have different viewpoints about this, but some companies share financial information with their team members. If you're not comfortable sharing financial information in terms of where your revenues were 3 months ago, monthly, or 4 months ago, versus where revenues are now, and they see that, I think they're going to understand really where the organization is and what needs to happen for it to survive. If you don't want to share specific financial information, you can share things like percentages, bar charts without numbers, but your team needs to understand right now in real time, what is the business's chance of surviving, number one. Number two, what they can do to help the business survive, including changes. But you're going to have to be very, very open and honest. If you know in your heart that you haven't done due diligence as a CEO, as an entrepreneur, as a business decision maker, that you've done some things that were missteps, bad decisions, you need to come clean. You need to come clean, because even if you don't come clean, your team members are going to know. And it's better for everybody to come together and say, look, this is the situation that we have right now. We know that things could have been better over the last 6 months or last year, but right now our futures are tied to it. If we don't get on board together, the company's going to fail and everyone's going to be out of a job. Don't use fear tactics by any stretch of the imagination, but it needs to be an open and honest, transparent conversation. And you need to make changes to your leadership style. You need to make changes to company culture. And, as people say, you've either got to change the people or change the people. You're either going to have to change the people's perspective and their attitudes and their work ethics. Otherwise, I'm not giving HR advice here, guys. I'm making that very, very clear. But you're going to have to make some tough decisions about how your business is going to survive, and changing people's perspective. There's a great saying I heard. It says, it brings me no joy that the hole is on your side of the boat. Meaning that if you're all in the same boat and there's a hole over on that side and you're over here, you're not safe, right? I think your team members need to understand that you're all in the same boat and we need to fix the holes. Otherwise, we're all gonna kind of drown in these crazy times of COVID-19. Second question, Joellen, was how do you build a brand while you're outsourcing HR? Was that the question?
Yeah, well, yes, it was. It was, if you're thinking of outsourcing the HR, how would you be able to obviously build that brand from the inside out if they're not obviously part of the agency? The HR function isn't part of the organization.
Yeah, an excellent question. And I'm not going to get into the weeds of whether it's better to outsource HR or to have some person on staff. Every company has to decide what's best for them. As we say in the Caribbean, there's more than one way to skin a cat. What I would say that is that during COVID-19, chances are you're going to be working remotely anyway. So it's almost as if you're outsourcing to your team members because they're not physically there. What I would suggest is that you have open and honest conversation with your HR person. Let them know what the goals of the organizations are. What is it you're working towards? How best can they support you, even if they're doing it remotely? Right now, there's a emerging field of HR called gig HR that was pioneered by a young lady from Barbados. She's now in the UK, and she pioneered this framework called gig HR. Her name is Dr. Rochelle Haynes, and she's done some great research on how do you engage people remotely, because right now we're living in a gig economy. People are literally doing their work on a beach in Bali, well, pre-COVID, in Bali or Indonesia or Vietnam or wherever. They're just co-sharing spots. And companies are going to have to get accustomed to engaging people that may no longer be coming into the office. But to get directly to your question, the question really is about clarity. It really is about clarity. There are tons of technology platforms out there that can help your HR team engage. There's one called 15five.com, one as in 15five.com. There's Office 5. There are tons of them. And I think that if you're concerned about outsourcing your HR, a technology platform that's inexpensive can actually help, but it's not going to solve the problem. You need to have very scheduled events, frequent events, whether it's all staff, leadership team only, come clean with the challenges they're trying to face, and also hit very specific benchmarks. One of the easiest ways to track success or failure is to manage by KPIs, metrics. So you and your HR person to be able to say, look, my employee engagement rate now is at 40%. That's not acceptable. We want to get to 70%. And I'm going to judge you as an HR person as leading this charge. I'm going to judge your success or failure by metrics in terms of internal comms or employee experience, employee engagement. And that's my advice. I'm hoping that answered the question.
Okay, great. So you want to continue with the presentation?
Yeah, I'll continue the presentation.
We've just got, sorry?
Yeah, I'll continue the presentation. Okay. I'll be very, very, very quick about it. So up here, get the word out. Use whatever opportunities you have, social media, word of mouth. Sometimes you can be clever with getting people to see your logo. Excuse me, just had to take a drink. Product placement, they're in live and action. Just get the word out about your organization. Get the word out somehow. Sneak in a cup with your logo on a webinar. Use social media. Do whatever you need to. I'm not going to get into the details on this because we're running out of time. But you just need to get the word out as fast as you can. Step 6 is break stuff, learn stuff. This is the PG version of something that we are practicing at Blueprint Creative. You're going to have to take risks. You're going to have to learn stuff. If you are not breaking stuff, you're probably not learning. One of my favorite entrepreneurs is a young lady called Sarah Blakely. She studied, well, she started a company called Spanx. It's basically a shapewear company for men and women. And she's one of the world's youngest billionaires one of the world's youngest self-made billionaires on the planet. And she told a story that whenever she came home from school, her dad would ask at the dinner table, Sarah, what did you fail at today? And she would say, oh, I tried out for cheerleading, but I failed at that. And he'd give her a high five. Or she'd say, oh, I failed at something else. And he'd actually be disappointed if it got to the point where for a whole week, she hadn't failed at anything. Because he realized that in life, if you're not failing at something, chances are you're not taking big enough risks. And that gave her the courage to go and build her own company, because for her, failure wasn't trying and not succeeding, failure was not trying. So you're gonna have to, guys, you're gonna really have to figure out, how do I learn new skills? Right now I'm learning a new technology platform so I can do stuff myself. Right now I'm really crappy at it, but I'm hoping that in a week I'll master it. Figure stuff out. Don't be afraid to break stuff, because you can only learn stuff once you've actually broken a few things. So very quickly, some facts. Stephen King's manuscript for Carrie was turned out 30 times before it was picked up by a publisher. Steve Jobs was famously kicked out from Apple, the company he started, before he came back. It's alleged that Disney was fired from a newspaper job, allegedly for not being creative enough. James Dyson, the guy who started Dyson vacuum cleaners, he tried 5,126 prototypes for his bagless technology before finally getting a prototype to work. And by the way, guys, he had actually shot his new technology to existing vacuum cleaners, and they all turned him down. They didn't turn him down because of a bad idea. They turned him down because they were making a lot of money from selling bags, and he would have disrupted that. So what did he do? He started his own vacuum cleaner company, and he's now a billionaire. Mark Ruffalo, this is the guy that played Bruce Banner, I do believe, in Avengers. Apparently, he was rejected 600 times before he successfully booked a role. And J.K. Rowling's script for Harry Potter was rejected by 12 publishers before she found success. The point here is that sometimes you got to keep on pushing. Even if you fail, learn something from your failure and push forward. A great book to read on this is Permission to Screw Up. I've read this book. It's one of my favorite books. I read it during a time where I had made some grave business mistakes. I felt, I felt down on myself. I read her book. I was like, if she can recover from these mistakes, heck, I can recover from mine. And just grab the book, read the chapters, learn from experience to understand that if you mess up at something, you still have a chance to recover. It's not the end of the world. The stakes might be higher now during COVID-19, but you really, really do have to learn, guys, to break stuff, and learn stuff, and recover from your mistakes. Step 7, very quickly, proceed with caution. I'm going to be very, very quick about this. During a crisis, things are different. Things that were perfectly fine 3 months ago are not fine anymore. So KFC recently had to pull an ad in the UK because the ad had the tagline "finger licking good," and someone was actually licking their fingers or about to, and they got complaints because that obviously you're not supposed to be doing that stuff during COVID-19, right? Geico had to pull an ad because it had a scene where people in the office were high-fiving each other and breaking social distancing, physical distancing norms. They had to pull the ad. Recently, Gal Gadot, who plays Wonder Woman, she thought she was doing a good thing by getting her celebrity friends to sing a remake of, I think it was Imagine by John Lennon. And she and a bunch of famous people put this video out and were singing, encouraging people to come together. There was a firestorm of controversy because a lot of people were saying, we don't want to see you singing from the comfort of your mansion. What are you doing to help? Are you donating money? Are you helping solve the problem? So even though the intention was good, it really backfired. So very quickly, just be very careful moving forward and realize that every number has a face. Your customers that you want them to spend money with you to survive, understand that they're going through something very, very difficult and very, very challenging. Some of them may have lost their jobs or will lose their jobs. Some of them have team members and employees who may have been affected directly by COVID-19, and they're in a very, very emotionally vulnerable place. So understand that before you go out there trying to build your brand, and you should build your brand because you have a responsibility to yourself, you have a responsibility to your team members to keep the company alive, you have a responsibility to your customers, but have some empathy knowing that things are not normal right now. And this is the end of my presentation. I have set up a private community club online, so to speak, where I'm going to be giving away some information that will be exclusive. I do have a class on the community that will allow you to understand more about the branding framework. So guys, if you want to join me, go to ronjohnson.mn.co and you are going to be able to log in. I have to give you permission to join, and you will have access to a free course that talks about branding. That being said, when you log in, you go right here to courses, and you'll see a crash course on branding, and you'll be able to access the free course. So I'm going to turn over to Joe. Joe, do you have any other questions, either from your perspective or from anyone who has been on the call?
Yes, we do have quite a few questions actually, and quite a few raised hands. So I know we've got 5 minutes left of the schedule, but I think given the number of questions that we've got, I think once you're okay to continue on, we can continue through. Okay. I mean, one of the things that we realise in the region that we do have a range of different companies from different sizes and makeups as such. Now, we have a question from Wilana Oldham, and I think it's quite important right now, especially in this climate when, you know, funds are tight, so to speak. Wilana has asked, how do you build a strong brand if you don't necessarily have a lot of staff that could be on social media or retweeting or sharing company communications as such, or you don't necessarily have the marketing spend? How do these smaller businesses that may only have a limited number of resources manage to create that brand and connect with their audience?
Okay, so we did a workshop called Beauty Bar 001 just before COVID hit Barbados, and we had a guest speaker called Nigel Henry. He's the customer experience director for Pizza North America, in charge of 7,000 restaurants, and he's a Caribbean guy born in Dominica. You know, has done very well internationally. And one of the things that he said that really stuck with me is use what's in your hands, right? Use what's in your hands. If you take a look at the story of David and Goliath, whether you look at it from a biblical standpoint or a business standpoint, but David was fighting the giant Goliath. He did not go into battle wearing heavy armor that would have bogged him down. He literally used what was in his hands: slingshot and stones, right? Companies that do not have a lot of resources can also use that same principle. And there are certainly maybe an infinite number of ways you can do it, but we won't get to go through all those ways. But I want to give you an insight into what I mean by citing the story of Ben & Jerry's. So Ben & Jerry's, if you probably know, is an ice cream maker. They were started by these two hippie guys, literally called Ben and Jerry's, and they grew their business from one store operation. They kept on going, and then all of a sudden they hit a brick wall. And if I remember the story correctly, some of the larger competitors went to the retailers, and said, if you put Ben & Jerry's on the shelf, we're going to withdraw all of our other ice creams. And of course, the retail stores couldn't afford that. So Ben & Jerry's was in a very bad predicament. And if I do remember correctly, what they did was that they didn't take out full-page ads in newspaper. There was no real social media back then. They actually started a protest in front of one of the biggest competitors that they had, whichever conglomerate it is that has the Pillsbury Doughboy. And they had these signs up, and they said, what's the Pillsbury Doughboy afraid of? They got media attention. All of a sudden, people knew Ben & Jerry's name, and they didn't spend one dime on advertising. Now, I'm not telling you to start a protest in front of your competitors, but I'm saying that there are ways that do not cost a lot of money for you to build your brand. Even if you can't afford to sponsor a post on LinkedIn or Instagram, you can still post as in organic growth. And a lot of companies have done that. They haven't spent a dime in advertising, but they have really, really grown their business with very little resources, simply by engaging with people, by delivering great customer experience. And if you really want to build your brand with no resources, first place to start has to be customer experience, because people are going to talk about your experience. People don't only talk about their bad experiences, they also talk about their good experiences. So, but of course, if you're going to focus on your customer experience, you also have to focus on your employee experience, because as the saying goes, your customer experience will never exceed your employee experience. Following? And that's where you start. Use what's in your hand, focus on developing phenomenally awesome products and services, let the word spread, try to get as much user-generated comments as possible, ask your customers for testimonials, ask them for referrals, ask them if they'll be interested in participating in a case study, ask them to respond to your tweets, Instagram, LinkedIn pages, just engage with them, tell them, look, I'm trying to build my brand here. You're one of our favorite customers. You always said we've done a good job. Do you mind giving us a testimonial or liking, sharing, thumbs up on social media? That's where you start. I start from the inside, quality of products, quality of service, focus on word of mouth, build your brand online, testimonials, user-generated content, and just build from there.
Okay, great, thank you. Now we have a few people that have their hands raised. I'm actually going to go through and I will invite them to ask their questions directly. So
Sure.
we have a raised hand from John Davidson. I'm going to unmute John so that he can speak.
Awesome.
John Davidson, can you hear us? I'm not sure if he's still there. John Davidson has, his audio isn't working as such. Okay, that's not a problem. We also have Marjorie Renaudus. So I'll unmute Marjorie so she can ask her question.
Okay.
Good day. I am from Suriname and I'm operating a winery. And a very big problem that we have is that we have a lot of people, workers, more lower workers who are working in the production sector. But we have a very big turnover of personnel. If we have to work from inside out, how do we cope with this problem if we are building a brand? Because
Okay,
the workers who are working on and we are investing, they are leaving. It's just for a short period of time. How do we cope with it?
If I understand your question, you're asking how do you build a brand where people are leaving constantly, is the question?
Yes.
Okay, great. So it's a very, very good question, and one that is very, very relevant to the situation, even pre-COVID, in industries that are really have a high turnover. So one of the things that you can do is set up your standards of behavior, and instead of just focusing on the standard of an individual, think of your business almost like a machine, but it's a machine made of people with feelings and different life goals, etc. But if you take a look at building structures in place and onboarding people into these structures and giving them parameters in terms of how to behave while they're there, you start to reduce the wide range of personality types. Now, I'm going to jump over into sports. I was listening to an analogy. You probably are familiar with the championship run of the Chicago Bulls. They won 2 repeats in the 90s. And if you look at the first championship they won and the last championship they won, yes, they all had Jordan and Pippen, but a lot of the other players that were around them had been traded, they left, they retired, whatever, but they were still able to bring that ring home. Same thing for the NFL football, NFL. One of their championship team that won multiple rings, one commentator was observing that the quarterback was the same as the boss, so the coach was the same, but a lot of their team members had changed. And the reason they were able to do that was that they were able to onboard their new recruits and say, this is what the company stands for. This is how we operate. This is what we do. This is who we are. This is our DNA, right? And if you can find a way to do that, and I'll jump back over to one of my favorite entrepreneurs, Tony Shea, that I mentioned, that runs Zappos. Zappos has a very curious way of onboarding people into the organization. So one of the ways they do that is that they start to train people. I think it's like a 4-week training or 2-month training. And then halfway through this training, they then tell people, I'm going to give you, I think it's $2,000 in cash to leave, to not completely train, to leave. And the reason they do that is because they want to make sure that people want to work at their organization so much that they are willing to pass up $2,000 in cash. Now, I'm not telling you to take on this particular tactic, but I am pointing out that they do spend a good amount of time training so that people will actually want to stay longer because of their company culture. Again, I mentioned things like brand anchors before, having a vivid vision, having a strong purpose, having core values, so that your reputation will actually precede you and people know how they're supposed to behave when they come into the organization. A few years ago, I wrote an article on LinkedIn called Why We Ask Skittles or M&Ms During Job Interviews. Because, by the way, we asked that question because we want to see people's personality. And I kid you not, I went out and I saw a business professional. He asked me where I'm from. I said, Blueprint Creative. And he said, you're the company that asks people Skittles or M&Ms during the interview process. And I said, yes. My point in sharing that story is that the word had gotten around. This is what Blueprint Creative stands for. And this is what we will accept while people are here. Try to get them to stay as long as possible. And even if people leave, the machine stays the same. I'm hoping that answered your question.
Yes, I think I have to work it out. But some of the points you were bringing forward, we already tried, like training. We did a lot of training for them, but what they are doing is they are using us as a web plank to go to bigger organizations. So they take the training, they take everything that we offer them, and then just to move forward. How do you, yes, if you are building a brand, it is very difficult to build a brand from within, because the people are thinking, and
so
that you are the only one who is building the brand. You are the only one doing everything, because everything that's under it will be leaving soon.
This sounds like it warrants a deeper conversation, because I have questions to ask that may be better asked in a private setting. I can talk to you afterwards, because I'm curious about things like your salary structure. You know, whether you're offering market rates, lower than market rates, higher than market rates. If there's something else their competition is offering them. But I'd be happy to take a separate call with you later if you want to spend about 10 minutes talking about it. It sounds like this. I might have to ask some questions that may be particular to your business, if that's fine with you.
Yes, please.
Okay. Joellen, who's that?
Yes, okay, great, thank you. We also have a question from Yasmin. Yasmin Ephraim, let me see if I can unmute Yasmin so she can ask her question. Yasmin, can you hear us? No? Well, her question that she typed into the box was, as an employee who can assist, how can employees assist in the changing of the brand's culture within an organization, and further encourage senior management to make the change? Because obviously if you're looking at it, quite often it can be coming from the top down, but if what can employees do to empower themselves to help change that company culture so that you have, you know, a positive outward-looking brand?
Okay, so cultures can change in at least one of two ways. Top down, where management says we need to change our culture, or from a grassroots scenario. The jury is out in terms of which one is more effective, but to answer that question, it sounds like you need to have a movement as opposed to a campaign. So the difference between a movement and a campaign is that a campaign has a start date and an end date. And most top-down, a lot of top-down management-driven cultural change programs are just that, it's a campaign. Hey, we want people to be more engaged, so we're gonna hire our agency, or we're gonna talk to our marketing department, are we gonna put out these communication messages now, and in 6 months it's gonna stop. That's a campaign. A movement is much more dynamic, it's much more energetic, and it can be started by anyone. So there are two ways I can conceptualize a movement working. Either that a team member feels like, I'm gonna make a difference in my small area. I'm gonna do something that is gonna put a smile on people's face. So I did a workshop for a company in Orlando, and you know, they were having some cultural issues. It really wasn't terrible, but it knew it could be better. And after the workshop, the admin assistant or the office manager, within 24 hours of hearing my recommendation, she went and she started a newsletter for her entire staff. Now, she didn't spend a dime on it. She just probably used like a free template or simple email, and she's used this newsletter to tell people thanks for the hard work they've done. It included a message from the CEO. It talked about people who had birthdays coming up and were looking forward to their birthday or had birthdays. And that was amazing from the perspective of the company, because this had never happened before, right? So she actually started a movement by putting a newsletter out. I'm sure she probably got quote unquote permission from the CEO to actually click send, but she started putting this together on her own. And from there, people started to breathe a little bit more like, hey, I can actually have fun at work and smile at work. So my recommendation is to start with something and there's a fantastic video online, guys. If you go on YouTube and you look for, I think, how to start a movement, it's this, it's a video of a concert, an outdoor concert, and there's this one guy and he's dancing. He's not dancing very well, by the way. He's dancing all kind of weird, and he, you know, you're wondering like, is this guy having a seizure? And then all of a sudden, one other person comes and they start dancing as well. And 2 more people come, and 3 more people come, and all of a sudden, the whole place is dancing with this weirdo, but they're all having a great time, right? And that's the way you start a movement. You can start in your own little sphere, make changes there, and bring people on. The second way you could consider doing is if you have enough trust in the management team to actually go to the management team and say, hey, I think we can do a bit better in terms of the employee experience. Can I lead out on this? Or are you willing to meet with me and a small group of team members to discuss how we can make changes? But you're also, it has to be, if you're gonna go that route, you have to show management the benefit of going that route. There's tons of research out there, guys, tons of research about how productivity increases when people are more engaged, and engagement rises when people are more committed and connected to the brand. So those are 2 ways. One, just start your own, and really just go on YouTube and Google how to start a movement or how to start a movement concert, something like that, and you'll see the video. Start that way. Just do what you can in your specific niche area and let it grow. Or if you trust management enough, go to management and say, I really think we can do a lot better, and here is how I am willing to lead out on it, and here is how it will benefit the organization. So I'm hoping that answered the question.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. We have just, well, there's 2 questions actually. We have a question from Nikisha and also a question from Claudia. which is focused really on this current situation with COVID-19 in mind. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'll ask the question because I think you may well answer it. It's similar from the two people. So in this current situation, how do people's perceptions change, or as it relates to what they perceive or their perception of what good quality is? Does it decrease during a crisis? And also, could you highlight any areas within a branding plan that may need to be adjusted? Because if people's perceptions are changing during the crisis, what could we be actually doing, practical steps that could be changed?
So the question is whether or not people's perceptions will change during a crisis, and how and what can we do about it?
Yeah.
Okay. So let me tackle the issue of perception apart from the COVID-19 scenario that we're facing right now. So if any one of you is a fan of seafood and you are aware even marginally about lobster in general, you'll probably know that there's a perception out there that Maine lobster is the best lobster out there, right? Interesting thing is, if you scroll back 100 years, lobster was far from a premium or even a middle of the road meal. Lobster was thought to be the cockroach of the sea, and they only gave lobster to prisoners and, curiously enough, cats. But certainly humans didn't want to touch it because they were viewed very negatively. But through some very clever moves of the industry, all of a sudden lobster, especially Maine lobster, is high on the list of people's menus. If you take a look at key lime pie, and I love citrus, I love key lime pie, and key lime pie is called key lime pie because it's made from limes from Florida Keys, right? And they've done a good job of integrating a location geo-branded into a food. The thing about it is, based on my research, key limes are also known as Mexican limes or West Indies limes. They're basically indistinguishable, but nobody goes out and says, I would like a West Indian lime pie or a Mexican lime pie, right? It's all about perception. Same thing from Kobe beef from Japan, Idaho potatoes, etc. People's perceptions change. And I would believe that during a crisis, when people's needs are changing, I suspect that the perception of a product may not change drastically in a short space of time, although it possibly could happen. But I think what's more going to be of a concern is the demand for your product over time. So they may still think that your product is premium, but they may not necessarily have the money to afford it, and that's going to be a problem. So the question is, how can you adapt to a scenario where demand for your product has fallen? And I would go back to some of the things we spoke about, earlier about retooling, repackaging, repurposing. See if that could work for you. But if you are correct, and all of a sudden something happened with the perception of your brand in a very, very short space of time, you need to take action immediately, like immediately. As I said earlier, people buy based on emotions and justify with logic. And rather than go through a list of repackaging or rebranding stories, I find I learn best when I look at other people's scenarios and then extrapolate the lessons from it. So if you're going to look at perception change and how you want people's perception to shift, you look no farther than case studies of like Old Spice, Domino's Pizza, where they completely changed. Look for Domino's, type in Domino's pizza turnaround or Domino's Pizza, oh yes we did. It's a great mini case study of how they changed the perception of their brand from the inside out, because people hated their stuff, people hated their pizzas. They said the crust tastes like cardboard, they said the sauce tastes like ketchup. This is the worst excuse for pizza ever, and they completely took it apart and put it back together. So rather than me trying to spend 5 or 10 minutes trying to explain it because we were out of time, I would suggest you look for that, and also just Google how to reposition your brand or how to change perception of your brand. And there's like so much information out there, guys, so much that you will probably have too much information and you just pick and choose what makes sense for your organization. But I suspect that it's more likely for the demand for your product to change as opposed to the perception of your product changing overnight. But if it does change overnight, the resources online, again, my favorite one, Domino's Pizza Turnaround, you absolutely have to watch it.
Okay. So I think we've got in most of the questions now. There are a few raised hands still. And so I will finish off with the last three raised hands, let's say. So I will start, and hopefully their audio is working. So I will go with Felina Williams. So I'm going to unmute Felina, and hopefully she'll be able to ask her question. Felina? Go ahead with your question. No, I think we may have some challenges. If you'd like to type your question into the questions panel, I can ask it then if we're having a few issues with your audio as such. I will move on to Neil Brian Gibbs, who has had his hand raised as well. So Neil, I've unmuted you. If you could ask your question.
Sure. Hi, good morning, Ron.
Hi, good morning.
Hi, I'm here in Barbados, and my question basically is looking within my industry. I'm in a pretty restrictive or pretty small industry, which is aviation consultancy. Now, the challenge, obviously, I'm providing not products, I'm providing more services, and being in such a specialized field that is taking a tremendous hit by this crisis. We're not really expected to see proper recovery for at least another 2 years, maybe more. What sort of overall suggestions would there be when businesses such as ours are faced with these almost insurmountable odds? How do you go about doing that sort of groundwork to make yourself continue to put yourself as being relevant?
Excellent question, and thanks for sharing that personal story or situation. A lot of companies out there are feeling exactly what you're feeling, and I think you're doing the exact right thing by trying to find ways, even joining this webinar, to access information on different perspectives. That's the first thing. So the second thing is that if you are correct about the industry taking 2 years to recover, you're gonna have to make some tough decisions. You mind if I ask how big your staff is, or it's just you?
Yeah, it's just me.
Okay, so the advantage of being a situation where it's just you is that you can move very quickly and with a lot of agility. But I would suggest that if that reality of 2 years is right, there's no way that your business is going to shape up. It's not going to look the same way in 2 years or even in 2 months as it looks right now. So I'm glad that you're aware. What I would say is that take a look at, I'm not intimately familiar with your industry, so I wouldn't want to kind of diagnose on the spot, but I want to point out the situation with BlackBerry. BlackBerry was at one point in time the dominant player in the smartphone market. I mean, they literally created the space, but through a series of missteps, you know, they lost it, and everybody thought that BlackBerry was done for. And they were, because they at that in BlackBerry's current situation at that time, they were dead in the water, right? But if you take a look at BlackBerry right now, they basically focus in on their core competency. And BlackBerry RIM right now, they're no longer in the smartphone market in any significant way, but they are killing it right now on cybersecurity. Because the thing that made people gravitate towards a BlackBerry, and to be quite honest, I still miss my BlackBerry, was that BlackBerries were very, very safe and secure. You know, they were used by politicians, celebrities, because they knew BlackBerry was the phone to have. I remember President Obama was seen frequently with his BlackBerry. What saved BlackBerry was that they didn't try to compete in. They stopped trying to compete in a industry where they were no longer relevant, right? And then they realized smartly that they never, even though they developed the smartphone industry, in truth and in fact, they were actually in the industry of peace of mind. Because when you picked up your BlackBerry, you felt safe that it wasn't going to be hacked. They were actually in the peace of mind industry. And when they were no longer able to compete with smartphones, they took it straight to online cybersecurity, and they're now profitable. So my question for you, I'm not necessarily asking you to answer it right now, but give some thought to what your true business really is. Is your true business aviation, or is your true business something else? Aviation is the way that you express that something else. Are you kind of seeing the point I'm trying to make here?
Yeah, understood. Understood.
Yeah. But like I said, I think all of us here on this line have to be very, very aware that the business model that was perfectly fine 6 months ago, or even 3 months ago, or even 3 weeks ago, may not exist anymore. It may not exist. So in my opinion, let's say that we're dealing with a hotel in Barbados and they do not have any tourists whatsoever coming in. They're going to have to face the reality that the business model may not work out until this whole COVID thing goes away, until, you know, until travel restrictions are eased, right? So I think it's the same thing for you. If you are convinced that you're not going to have a good client base within the next 2 years, you can probably still hang on to whatever is left of it when curfews are lifted, but I agree with you, it's not going to be the same. So you would have to give some thought, some long thought to what business you are actually in. Yes, you're in aviation, but aviation may be the outcome of whatever business you're truly in.
Well, if I can just end on this one, I would say that how I originally got in was through my degree as an engineer. Now, coming out of that was a bit of programming that I did, going through some quality work, quality auditing and quality management, which ultimately led to the aviation consultancy. Now, I'm still getting some inquiries and still getting some business, even during the lockdown phases from across the region, because I can work, and I do often work remotely. But it's never been a situation where people are breaking down my door, because I've never really been known. So it's sort of a toss-up between, do I take the risk and throw my hat completely in the ring now during the crisis so that I can establish myself as the person to come to? Or do I go back to first principles and see if there's lateral transitions that I can do, as you suggested, outside of aviation, using some of these core competencies? I believe that there may be an opportunity to do a bit of both, but I'm never going to be independently wealthy through it. That was never the goal. But I do take your points. I made copious notes through the entire presentation, and there's going to be a lot of digesting and a lot of soul searching going on from here on. So I want to thank you for the time that you spent.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that. What I would say is that you have articulated your scenario very, very, very well. It's obvious you're very self-aware about where your business is right now. I would encourage you to actually embrace what some people call the power of and. For you, it may not be an either or, right? The rules are changing. If you're still getting work from the region, hang on to that really, really well. But if your true passion is in terms of whatever industry you're in, and your true passion is showing that industry via aviation, I would suggest very, very seriously that you put together a very, very strong, what we call it blueprint, survival, because not you just don't want to survive, you want to thrive, but to put together a survival plan where you build your personal brand hard. I'm talking about from today, right? Just get out there, do more on social media, LinkedIn, Instagram. If you are a writer, start writing articles. If you're not a writer, start sharing articles. You get a designer to help you develop your brand. Start speaking out on, you can start small. Take a note of this. I think this book is going to help you a lot. There's a book called Stand Out by Dorie Clark, STANDOUT by Dorie Clark, DORIE CLARK. I think you need to give some thought to becoming a thought leader in your specific industry, so that when things bounce back, people know exactly who that they're going to go to. Neil Brian Gates, because this is the guy that's been speaking about the challenges the industry is going to face, how he bounce back, and that's what I would suggest.
Yeah, that's great suggestions. Thank you so much for that.
Sure, no problem.
Okay, thank you very much. There's a couple of questions. There was a question from Jamila from St. Vincent, actually, who had a question early on in the presentation. I'd just like to kind of track back to that one question that she put into the question panel, unless, let me see if I can get her online to ask her question herself. Jennifer, where are we? Jamila, sorry. Jamila, can you hear me? I'm not sure if Jennifer is available to speak, but her question was relating to the actual, striking a balance in your actual content and how you increase your engagement with your customers. I think that's something that, we all as marketers have to struggle with. We can put tons and tons of content out there, messages, but if people are not engaging, or if, say, for example, you have a particular tone of voice which is very specialized and professional tone, which may need to be maintained, but how do you manage to keep people actually engaged as well? Okay,
so if you break branding down to the very, very I don't want to say basic, but the building blocks of branding. I'm sure you've heard this before. People do business with others they know, like, and trust, right? The aim of great branding is to become more known, more liked, and more trusted. How you do that is definitely up to you based on your industry. The question of engagement with customers is very important, because in our industry, you hear a lot of people saying, hey, we need more brand visibility, But if you look at what we call the KLT equation, know, like, trust, the know component is only 1/3 of the overall equation. In terms of the brand voice, if you're an entrepreneurial environment, chances are your business tone of voice is going to follow the founder's tone of voice. So, for instance, my personality is I really love ridiculous puns. So if you read my articles, I'll have some tongue-in-cheek references here and there. I use a bit of humor, because people in the office know that I love silly little puns. Unfortunately, they banned me from having puns in the office. So you could guess I guess you could say that on punishment. Hopefully you got that punishment. But I use my personality I let my personality show in my content. I don't think there's a hard and fast rule to answer the question, a hard and fast rule about what your brand personality should be. I think that you have to take a lot of things into consideration. You know, whatever brand personality you're putting out there, it should be authentic. Let me give you an example. Richard Branson is highly respected as an entrepreneur. And when he speaks as this kind of sage adventurer who's built his company from scratch. And he's very open about all the mistakes he's made. And he's very, very calm about this. His personality is authentic. If you take a look at this guy, Gary Vee, I cannot remember how to pronounce his last name, but everyone calls him Gary Vee. He curses more per paragraph than any other public speaker that I have heard. Every other word or every other sentence is a four-letter F word. And people love him. The people that gravitate to him because they know that he's going to keep it real. If Richard Branson all of a sudden tried to talk like Gary Vee, people would think he's gone crazy because that's not who he is. And if Gary Vee started to communicate with people in the way that, Sir Richard Branson communicates, people will say, like, what's going on? My recommendation is to be your authentic self, let that shine through, but find ways to become more known, liked, and trusted. So at Blueprint Creative, we regularly send out birthday cards, electronic birthday cards to our customers. It makes them feel special. That's pretty simple. Other people carry them out for lunch. Other people do so many different things. There's more than one way to skin a cat, but you're on the right track in terms of trying to engage customers. But just be authentic with it, be consistent with it. Don't start and then stop. Listen to your customers, because some customers may not want to have a gift basket delivered, or they may not want to, go for lunch or whatever, but they may have a completely different way that they would love to engage with you. And there's some of our customers that, we would go into their office and they simply talk. They talk about everything that's going on in their company. They talk about so many different things. We sit and we listen and we engage, and that is simply a way of engaging customers. But I would suggest you listen to them. Listen very, very carefully to what they're saying, and respond in kind in the way that they want to be engaged.
Okay. I know that the gentleman who was asking this question is from Invest SVG. So obviously their focus is on investment specifically. And I know that, obviously that is quite a specific request as it relates to obviously getting the right tactics for the investment arena. I will have a little plug in there, Jim, and I'm sure you're familiar with Suzette and Kuiper, and obviously the communication strategy that we're looking to develop. And we will be also looking at a webinar that does speak specifically to investment promotions. So I will, at this point, actually, I'm going to limit it down to just two more questions. We have a question from Abby Venter and also Joy Lewis, and I will go to, after those two questions, we'll wrap it up there. We'll announce our winner for the prize, and obviously if you do have more questions, then you can obviously shoot myself or Ron any further questions. Actually, Abby's taken her head now, so we won't go to Abby, but I will go to Joy. If Joy is still has a question. No, Joyce no longer has her question, so that's fine. Now, Joyce has actually posted her question into the box. Joy owns a small business, a new business, should I say. How do you go about increasing the number of early adopters beyond focusing on your staff, which are inside, and focusing on social media, etc.? I will actually just do a small plug before you answer that question, but we will also be having a second webinar on social media and how to respond to increased social media during this time. Whilst everybody is online, we've seen that a lot of people have had an increase in demand through social media. So there will be a webinar coming up in 2 weeks' time that focuses on that. So that could be one that you may well wish to register for also. But John, I'll let you respond briefly.
Yeah, you broke up for a short bit. Can you repeat the question?
Sorry, so the question was, as a new business, how do we increase the number of early adopters beyond focusing on our staff, which are inside, and focusing on social media?
Okay, so if you're looking at the adoption curve, it kind of goes like this, and then back down like this, early, the late majority, and the libraries, etc. It sounds like whatever new business this is, it may either Joy is talking about a new project or a new type of product, or she's talking about adoption when it comes to giving a new business a try. So I'm gonna try to tackle it in a way that makes sense for both. If you are specifically looking out for early adopters for your project, I think a big step of it has to be based on your communications messages. It has to be based on letting these early adopters know that you may not know they are calling early adopters, but you have to get into the psyche of people. If you're using social media, you really need to be very, 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 very clear that whatever you say that you're putting out there, it's almost like a whistle for people who are looking for that project. And I would love to know more about what Joy's actual product or service is, but there's a lot of research out there. If you type in, attracting early adopters online, but I think it's really without having any more information on Joy's business, I would just take it back to the basics. The fact that people do business for others they know, like, and trust. So you're gonna have to focus on some level of brand visibility, a certain level of likability, and the messaging that you choose for early adopters may be very, very different from the messaging you're choosing for the late adopters. If your product or service is very diverse, or if your product or service is completely new, I think you need to show people early about the benefits of using your product or service. That might happen via, let's say that it's some new technology you develop, put out content that shows how this specific piece of technology can help your business. If it is something in the entertainment industry, or if it's something to do with computer or IT, you really, really need to make sure that you know what your early adopters want. The best way to do that, you might look at doing some focus groups, some cheap surveys, using SurveyMonkey. But I think that you really need to listen very carefully to the insights of these people and just respond to it. I'm not sure if I am able to answer any more of that without knowing more details about Joy's business, but if she wants to reach out to me afterwards, I'm happy to have a conversation with her.
Okay, yeah, so I would suggest, Joy, if you can drop one an email, you can drop me an email, that's fine, and I can pass on the details and you guys can connect offline as such. Our last question then, I'm going to go to Joseph Benfield. Joseph, I'm just going to unmute you if you'd like to ask your question.
Yes, thanks, Joellen. Thanks for bringing this seminar, and thanks to Caribbean Export for hosting this series. And thank you, Ron. That was very succinct but insightful presentation. My question is, I'm in the, well, my main business is in the wedding and events industry. And obviously our industry has disappeared, evaporated, because no large gatherings are being allowed. And from all I'm seeing, I'm anticipating that this is going to go on maybe late into the third quarter, and maybe early in the fourth quarter before we start to see large gatherings happening again. Because even if the government releases the restrictions, people are going to be hesitant. So my question is, we need to remain relevant. How do you strike that balance when posting on social media between promoting your business but showing the empathy for the situation? Because yeah, we want to promote our business, but we got to be mindful that people are in very, very vulnerable spaces.
Yeah. So yeah, what you're describing in your industry, it's hard not to feel empathy for people in that industry because it's going to get hit hard. So a friend of mine recently invited me to a Zoom party for his wife. His wife had just, I think, hit 40 years old. It was all a big secret. I had read about Zoom parties, but I'd never actually been to one. So I log in, I have no idea what to expect. And there's this screen with like dozens of people, and they're all dancing and enjoying themselves. And in the corner, there's this DJ, and this DJ is just spinning tunes, right? And a lot of the people there were from the Caribbean, and I'm hearing all of these really great Caribbean tunes. I'm looking literally at dozens of people who are hearing the same thing I'm hearing, and they're different parts of the world, right? But they were fully engaged, like fully engaged. I think that is simply an example of how people are adapting. So the DJ was not going to be able to go play at a party, but she made herself available for Zoom parties, and she was gotten paid for it, right? I don't know if she would get paid as much as if she had done a live concert, but the fact is she's getting paid for it. I'm trying not to be too specific in terms of your situation for knowing more information, but it might be a case where wedding planners now plan weddings via Zoom or go to a meeting. Your role, because your role as a wedding planner is to create memories, right? And that's how you do it. That's how you do your business. You help people create lasting memories that are lodged in their minds for years or even decades. The wedding is simply an output of what you're doing, right? You, I think, need to focus on how do I do what I really do in terms of creating this memorable experience, this life-changing experience within the parameters that you have available to you. Because people are going to get married, there's still in the future, it might be only 3 people live getting married, literally in the room, and you may have dozens or hundreds of other people zooming in. Maybe you can adapt your services to plan these things. You know, you have a wedding theme in the background. You know, you're still the wedding planner who's going to make sure everything goes correctly. You know that the priest or the pastor is going to be logging in at this particular time. You know that you've given strict instructions for the priest to only speak for 5 or 10 or 15 minutes or whatever the case is. You're going to organize entertainment, because at the Zoom party I went to, there was, I don't know which party where she was, but apart from the DJ, they also hired a singer to sing one of, I think, his wife's favorite songs. I understand that these are dozens of people at different places in the world. So if you no longer have the option, the practical option to organize a wedding where people come together, you still have the option to help people put together an event that will be memorable for years and years to come. So the fact that you can't get them together in one place is unfortunate, but you can still get them together and create a memorable experience. You might partner with a platform that might have a theme for weddings, or you might, I don't know the ins and outs of your industries, but you are in the memory making business. Live weddings is simply the output of the real business you're in, which is peace of mind and making memories. You just got to figure out, how do I do that through technology? Did I answer your question?
Thank you. Yes, thank you. And some good observations. Thanks a lot.
Okay, great. Well, I would at this point like to thank Ron for his time and sharing his expertise in the area of branding. Yes, a couple of people had asked how do they reach you. So obviously, as you can see on the screen right now, there are his contact details. As I mentioned, we do have a number of webinars coming up. If you can go to the next slide there, Ron.
Oh, sorry.
Slide. Yeah, so if you do go to our website, carib-export.com and /webinars, we have a number of other webinars that will be coming up next week. It is on supply chain management. We will also have a webinar on social media within this environment, within this crisis. We have 2 other upcoming webinars which will be on the website shortly. Tips for leaders during this crisis, which will be run by Norma Shorey-Bryan, and also business continuity, which will be led by Cheryl Griffith. So if you're a business that's obviously, looking for further information, obviously do visit our website, join those webinars, shoot any one of the Caribbean Export staff a question or query, and obviously also sign up to our website. So now we get to the important part, should I say, about the prize giving.
Yes.
Or
yes.
allocation as to the prize. I think it's only fair to award the prize to somebody that is still on the call. Unfortunately, one of the people that I was going to award it to has already left, so I'm going to award it to the second person who presented a number of queries in the questions box, and also asked. Personally, I feel quite a very relevant question because of the makeup of the region and the current situation which we're all faced in, where funds are constrained. We are in a very unprecedented situation, and people are really looking for real solutions to help them build their brand when resources are limited. And I believe that you were able to answer that question quite well. So I would like to award that voucher to Willana Oldham.
Yay.
Is that the round of applause for Willana?
Yeah.
So we'll be in touch with Willana after this, and obviously get that gift out to Willana. All right.
Awesome.
So with that, as I say, there will be a follow-up questionnaire. I would be grateful if you could all provide your feedback. As I say, if you would like to reach out to us, you will have obviously already have my email address. As I say, visit our website. If you have any further questions, do just drop us an email. Thank you very much for your time. At this point, I'm going to end the webinar.
Before you do that, just letting everybody know these are my contact information. And also, I just want to say thanks very much to Joellen and her team for inviting me. Blueprint Creators is very happy to be a part of it. And I just want to commend Caribbean Export for this series of events. You guys are doing a great job. Please keep it up.
Great, thank you very much. Have a lovely afternoon, everybody, and we'll see you all soon, hopefully in the next webinar.
Awesome.
All right, great.